Hello students, Jinali Shah welcomes you on behalf of Saraswat International Academy. Today we will begin with the last part of our chapter Biological Classification. In the previous videos we have studied regarding the five kingdom classification given by Whittaker, and according to that five kingdoms are the kingdom Monera, Protista, Fungi, Plantae and Animalia. Out of that, the first three kingdoms, that are Monera, Protista and Fungi, we have already studied in detail. Today we will study in short the kingdom plant, the kingdom animal, and today we will also study about those organisms which are not placed in the five of the kingdoms given by Whittaker. So now first of all we will begin with the kingdom Plantae. Here we will study in short only, because the next chapter is completely regarding the kingdom Plantae. Here we will only study in short. So which organisms are included in the kingdom Plantae? So it includes all the eukaryotic chlorophyll containing organisms. So eukaryotic chlorophyll containing organisms are placed in the kingdom Plantae, and commonly they are called as the plants. Now normally we know that plants are autotrophic in nature, but a few members of the kingdom Plantae, they are partially heterotrophic. Not totally heterotrophic, but partially. That is, some of them are insectivorous plants. That is, they feed on insects, they trap the insects, and in this way they fulfill their nitrogen requirement. Or some of the plants are also the parasitic plants. So few members of the kingdom Plantae are partially heterotrophic, such that some of them are insectivorous plants, that is, they trap the insects and fulfill their nitrogen requirement, and some of them are parasitic plants. The examples of insectivorous plant are bladderwort and the Venus flytrap. They both are the insectivorous plant. These plants, they have the structures which help them to trap the insects, and in this way they fulfill their nitrogen requirement. An example of a parasitic plant is a cuscuta. So basically cuscuta, it depends on the other plants for its nutrients requirement. Now when we talk about the plant cells, they are eukaryotic cells which have the prominent chloroplast and the cell wall, which is made up of the cellulose. So basically what differentiates, what is a common structure differentiating a plant cell from the animal cell? So the main structures which differentiates the plant cell from the animal cell are the presence of the chloroplast, which are present only in the plant cell, absent in the animal cell, and another one is the presence of the cell wall, which is absent in the animal cell. And the cell wall here is made up of the cellulose. Now which groups are included in the kingdom Plantae? So it includes algae, it includes bryophytes, it includes pteridophytes, it includes gymnosperms, it includes angiosperms, and all these structures we will be studying in detail in the next chapter. So these are the examples of the this is a bladderwort and this is a Venus flytrap. Both of these are the insectivorous plants. They have the structures which trap the insects. So students, here in a Venus flytrap you can see the structure, and this is an insect which this plant have trapped, and this one is a cuscuta. So white colored structures, these structures are the cuscuta, and it is living on the other plant. So basically it is which type of plant? A parasitic plant. We know parasite are the organisms which are dependent on the other living organisms. So basically they are non-green structures and they are dependent on the other plants for their requirements. So these are the examples of the heterotrophic plants. The bladderwort and Venus flytrap, they are the insectivorous plants, and cuscuta, it is a parasitic plants. Now when we talk about the life cycle of the plant, the life cycle of the plant is divided into two phases. One is a diploid sporophytic phase and another one is a haploid gametophytic phase. Now sporophytic phase, it produces the spores, whereas the gametophytic phase, they produces the gametes. This complete part we will be studying in detail in the next chapter. And this diploid sporophytic phase and the haploid gametophytic phase, they alternate with each other, and that phenomenon is called as the alternation of generation. What do you mean by alternation of generation? The diploid sporophytic stage alternates with the haploid gametophytic stage. So say for example, suppose now it is a gametophytic phase, after that it will be sporophytic, then again there will be the gametophytic stage, then again sporophytic stage. So here in plants, the life cycle of the plant is divided into two stages. One is diploid sporophytic stage, which is spore forming, and another one is a haploid gametophytic stage, which is gamete producing. And these two phases, they alternate with each other, and that phenomenon is called as the alternation of generation. Now, the lengths of the haploid and diploid phases, that is how much period the plant will be in a gametophytic stage, for how much time period it will be in the sporophytic stage, and whether these phases are free living or are dependent on other, that is varying among the different groups of the plants. So what does it mean? How much period will be the haploid stage, how much period will be the diploid stage, and whether the sporophytic and gametophytic stages are independent or are dependent on other, it vary from plant to plant. And this phenomenon is called alternation of generation. What is alternation of generation? The diploid sporophytic stage alternates with the haploid gametophytic stage, and that is called as the alternation of generation. In this particular slide you will see in brief the process of alternation of generation. So as I told you, this is a gametophytic stage. It is which type of stage? Haploid. What does it produces? Gamete. Now this gamete, it fuses. Now male gamete will be there, female gamete will be there, and it forms the gametes, they fuse and form the zygote. So formation of the zygote marks the starting of the sporophytic stage. This zygote, it divides by the mitosis, and then it forms a complete sporophytic plant body. Now sporophytic plant body, it is which type of structure? It is a diploid structure. Now these sporophytic cells, they divide by the meiosis, and it produces the spores. These spores on mitosis, it forms the haploid, that is gametophyte. So basically gametophyte is a haploid structure and sporophyte is a diploid structure, and this is called as the alternation of generation. They alternate with each other. The gametophyte stage and the sporophyte stage, they alternate with each other, and that is called as the alternation of generation. So that is regarding the kingdom Plantae. Now we will begin with the kingdom Animalia. Here also we will study in short regarding the kingdom Animalia, because there is a complete chapter where each and every animal group is explained in detail. Here we will study in short. So which organisms are included in the kingdom Animalia? It includes the heterotrophic eukaryotic organisms, which are multicellular and which lack the cell wall. So all the heterotrophic eukaryotic multicellular organisms lacking the cell wall will be placed in the kingdom Animalia. Now we know, as they are heterotrophic, they cannot prepare their own food. So they are directly or indirectly dependent on the plants for their food requirement. So they are dependent on plants either directly or indirectly. Now they digest the food in their internal cavity and store the food either in the form of glycogen or in the form of the fat. So basically animals need to digest the food, and that food will be digested into the cavity, and then digested food will be stored either in the form of the glycogen or in the form of the fat. And here the mode of nutrition is called as the holozoic mode of nutrition, which means they need to ingest the food. They need to intake the food inside the body. So that mode of nutrition is called as the holozoic mode of nutrition. Now when we talk about the animals, they follow the definite growth pattern and then they grow into adults that have the definite shape and size. So they show a very proper growth pattern. Whereas when we talk about the plants, the growth pattern is not proper. Whereas when we talk about the animals, they show the definite growth pattern and then they grow into adults which have a definite shape as well as the size. Now, the higher forms that are well-developed animals, they show the well-developed sensory and neuromotor mechanism, which means they have well-developed nervous system as well as they have a well-developed sensory organs as well as their muscular system is also well-developed. Most of the animals are capable of locomotion, that is they can move from one place to another. They undergo sexual mode of reproduction by copulation of male and female, that is the male and female organisms, they undergo physical relation and undergoes the sexual reproduction, and after sexual reproduction they show the embryological development. So that is regarding the kingdom Animalia, which we have studied in short. So here we come to the end of the 5 kingdom classification given by Whittaker. But now there are various other organisms too which are not mentioned in the Whittaker's kingdom. So in the next part of the chapter we are going to study those organisms which are not mentioned in the 5 kingdom classification given by Whittaker. So those organisms will be introduced briefly in the following part of the chapter. So which are those organisms? Viruses, viroids, prions and lichens. So these are the organisms which have no mention in the 5 kingdom classification given by Whittaker. Basically, out of this, some of them like viruses, viroids, they are considered as acellular organisms. So first of all, we will study regarding the viruses. Now, why the viruses did not find any place in the classification? Because they are not considered as a true living organisms. So basically, viruses did not find a place in classification since they are not true living. Because if we consider a living organism as those organisms which have a cell structure, so viruses were not given the place in a classification system because they were not considered truly living. Because if we consider any organism as a truly living, it should have a cell structure, but that was not with the viruses. So viruses, they are non-cellular organisms that are characterized by having inert crystalline structure outside the living cell. So what does it mean? When the viruses are outside the living cell, they are like just a simple chemical. So they were considered as a non-cellular organism which when are outside the living organisms, they are inert crystalline structure. Now viruses are obligate parasites. Obligate parasite means they are compulsorily parasites. They will always require the host to replicate. If the host is not available, the viruses can never replicate, and therefore viruses are considered as a obligate parasites. Once they infect the cell, they take over the machinery of the host cell to replicate themselves, killing the host. So basically, when they are outside the host, they behave as a non-living entity. Once they enter into the host, they use the machinery of the host cell. That is, they take the materials from the host cell. They use the DNA of the host cell. Using the DNA of the host cell, they will multiply and they may also kill the host cell. So basically, viruses are considered as a connecting link between the living and non-living organisms. Why? Because when they are outside the host cells, they behave as a non-living particle. They are inert structures. but once they enter the definite host cells, using the host cell machinery, they start to replicate, and when they enter the host cell, they behave as a living entity, and therefore they are considered as a connecting link between the living organisms and the non-living organisms. Now, certain history regarding the viruses. So, Louis Pasteur, he is the scientist who gave the name viruses, and the term meaning of the term is venom or the poisonous fluid. So, basically they are very harmful to the host. So, venom, or it is considered as a poisonous fluid. D.J. Ivanovsky. So, he recognized certain microbes as a causal organism for mosaic disease of tobacco. So, in the tobacco, the mosaic disease occur, which is called as the tobacco mosaic disease, and he observed certain microbes which were responsible to cause this disease. Now, he found that these organisms which causes the mosaic diseases in tobacco, they were found to be smaller than bacteria. Now, their sizes are very small. They are also smaller than the bacteria. How did he concluded that their size is smaller than bacteria? Because these microbes were easily passed through the bacteria-proof filters. So, bacteria-proof filters, SEBI, these microbes were able to cross them. So, these viruses were found to be smaller even than the bacteria. The viruses could even infect the bacteria. So, you can imagine the size of the viruses. The next scientist is M.W. Beijerinck. So, he demonstrated that the extract of the infected plants of the tobacco could cause the infection in the healthy plants, and called the fluid as the contagium vivum fluidum, which means infectious living fluid. Now, what this scientist said? Now, Ivanovsky, he said that mosaic disease of the tobacco is caused by some microbes, and the size of this microbe is smaller than the bacteria because these microbes could cross the bacteria-proof filters. Now, this Beijerinck, what did he do? He took the extract of the infected plants of the tobacco, and this extract he inserted into the healthy plants of tobacco. And when he inserted this extract into the healthy plants of tobacco, he found that the healthy plants of the tobacco were also infected by those microbes, and he called that particular extract as contagium vivum fluidum, which means infectious living fluid. Then came W.M. Stanley. What did he showed? He showed that viruses could be crystallized, and crystals consist of proteins. So, he said that the mixture, or you can say the extract of the viruses could be crystallized, and when he examined that crystals, he found that crystals were made up mainly of the proteins. So, that is regarding the history of the viruses. Now, these are certain shapes of the viruses you can see. So, this is a adenovirus which have a polyhedral shape. This is a tobacco mosaic virus which have the helical shape, and this is a bacteriophage. T for bacteriophage. So, bacteriophage are the viruses which infect the bacteria. Now, description regarding the viruses. So, viruses are inert outside their specific host. What does it mean? When they are outside the host cell, they are inert. They do not behave as a living organism. They are simply the normal chemicals. But they are obligate parasite. What does it mean? So, once they enter the host cell, then using the host cell machinery, using the host cell genome, they will replicate and form their copies. So, we can say that viruses are obligate parasites. Now, what the virus contains? Stanley proved that the crystals of the virus, it consists of proteins. So, basically it is found that they are made up of proteins. But in addition to protein, they also contain the genetic material, and it is the genetic material which is the infectious part of the virus. and that genetic material could be either RNA or DNA, but never ever they will contain both DNA and RNA. That is very, very important. Viruses will either have the DNA or it will have the RNA, but never both DNA and RNA will be present together. So viruses, it consists of the protein as well as a genetic material which is either DNA or RNA. So basically we can say that virus is a nucleoprotein. Nucleic acid along with the protein. So what viruses contain? They contain the nucleic acids along with the protein. And the infectious part of the virus is the genetic material. What is the part of the virus which causes the diseases or which causes the harm to the host? And it is nothing but the genetic material. Now, viruses which infect the plant, in them the genetic material is a single stranded RNA. So those viruses which damages the plant or viruses which have the plant as their host, they have single stranded RNA as the genetic material. Whereas the viruses that infect the animals, they either have single or double stranded RNA or it may contain the double stranded DNA. So plant viruses, that is, what are plant viruses? Viruses infecting the plants. What is their genetic material? Their genetic material is a single stranded RNA. And animal viruses, what do you mean by animal viruses? Viruses that infects the animals. So that animals either have the single or double stranded RNA or they may have the double stranded DNA as the genetic material. And bacterial viruses or bacteriophages. So what are bacterial viruses or bacteriophages? So they are the viruses which infects the bacteria. So in them the genetic material is double stranded DNA. So this is very, very, very important plant. This is very, very important point. Plant viruses, they have single stranded RNA as the genetic material. Animal viruses, they have the single or double stranded RNA or double stranded DNA as a genetic material. And bacteriophages, they have the double stranded DNA as the genetic material. Now the structure of the viruses. So the protein coat of the virus is called as a capsid. So basically we know that virus is a nucleoprotein. It will have nucleic acid and protein. So basically the nucleic acid are present in the center part and this nucleic acid is protected by a protein coat. So that protein coat of the virus is called as capsid. And this capsid is made up of the small subunits which are called as the capsomeres. So this protein coat of the virus is called capsid and this capsid is made up of the smaller units which are called as capsomeres. And what is the function of the capsid? To protect the nucleic acid. These capsids, they protect the nucleic acid. Now, the arrangement of the capsomeres give the different shapes to the viruses. So that arrangement of the capsomere either is helical or it may be in the polyhedral geometric forms. So the capsomere's arrangement is either helical or in the polyhedral forms. Now viruses, they are the causal agents of diseases like mumps, smallpox, herpes and influenza. AIDS, which is caused in humans, is also a viral disease. In plants, certain symptoms like mosaic formation, leaf rolling, leaf curling, yellowing and vein clearing, dwarfing, stunted growth, these are the various symptoms due to the virus infection. So that is regarding the structure. So now here I told you that the capsomere arrangement is either helical or in the polyhedral form. So this is a complete capsid and it's small. These units are called as the capsomere. and the shape here is the helical, and within that capsomere this is a nucleic acid which is protected. The next one is a polyhedral virus. So here you can see it is a particular geometric shape. This complete is a capsid. Its small units are called as capsomere, and within this capsid the nucleic acid is protected. So these are the polyhedral viruses. Now in certain viruses the capsid is again covered by an envelope which is a combination of protein, lipids and carbohydrates. So in certain viruses capsid again is covered by a layer of a protein, lipid and carbohydrate, and those viruses are called as the enveloped viruses. So they have an envelope surrounding the capsid. So the capsid of some viruses is enclosed by an envelope which consists of combinations of proteins, lipids and carbohydrates. Such viruses are called as the enveloped viruses. And those viruses which have capsid only, but that capsid is not covered by an envelope, those viruses are called as non-enveloped or also called as the naked viruses. So based on the presence of the envelope, there are two types of the viruses. One is enveloped viruses and another one is the naked viruses. So if an envelope is present surrounding the capsid, then such viruses are called as enveloped viruses, and if the capsid is not surrounded by an envelope, such viruses are called as non-enveloped or naked viruses. So here you can see the two diagrams. This is a naked virus, this is an enveloped virus. So here you can see the middle part is the genetic material. Surrounding it, this is a capsid, this is a nucleic acid, this is a capsid, and this capsid is again surrounded by a layer of a envelope. So such viruses are called as the enveloped viruses. Whereas here you can see there is only the nucleic acid and this is the capsid. No additional envelope is present surrounding the capsid. So such viruses are called as the naked viruses. Now next one is the viroids, which is also called as the free infectious RNA. So a scientist called Theo Diner, he discovered a new infectious agent, and that infectious agent was also smaller than viruses, and it caused the diseases called as the potato spindle tuber. So Theo Diner, he found a infectious material which was smaller than virus and it caused the potato spindle tuber. Now this infectious material consists of what? It only consists of the free RNA. It lacked the protein coat. So basically what is virus? Virus is a nucleoprotein. It consists of nucleic acid and the capsid that is made up of the protein. And when we talk about viroids, viroids are the infectious agents which are made up of only free RNA. They do not contain the protein coat. And as they do not contain the protein coat, their size is even smaller than the viruses. So they were named as the viroid. What were they named as? Viroid. Because they do not contain the capsid. They only contain the nucleic acid. RNA of the viroid basically is a low molecular weight. So viroids are the infectious agents which are made up of only free RNA. They do not contain the protein coat or they do not contain the capsid. And as they do not contain the capsid, their size is even smaller than the viruses. And such particles were named as the viroids. Now, certain other material are prions or slow viruses or smallest proteinaceous infectious agent. So now viruses, what do they contain? Protein coat, that is capsid, as well as it contains the nucleic acid. What do viroid contain? They contain only the free RNA but they lack the capsid, or you can say they lack the protein coat. Now these prions are the material which are made up of only proteins. They do not have the genetic material, but their protein is an infectious part. And their size, when we talk, their size is similar to the viruses. So certain infectious neurological diseases. Neurological diseases are the diseases which infects the nervous system. They were found to be transmitted by an agent which consists of abnormally folded protein. So certain neurological abnormalities are caused by the agents which consist only of the protein. None other material is present in them, and their size was similar to the size of the viruses. Those agents were called as the prions. So students, you need to remember, what do virus contains? Virus contains the nucleic acid and the protein coat which is called as capsid. Now how can we differentiate with it viroid? So viroid will only contain what? It will contain the RNA. It will lack the capsid or it will lack the protein coat. And what are prions? Prions are the infectious agent which consist only of the protein. They do not contain the genetic material. Now the diseases caused by prions are bovine spongiform encephalopathy, which is commonly called as the mad cow disease in the cattle. So in a cattle there is a disease called mad cow disease or bovine spongiform encephalopathy, which is caused by the prions, and its analogous variant, it causes a disease in human, and that disease is called as the CR-Jacob disease. The name of the disease is the CR-Jacob disease. So that is regarding the prions. So viruses is a nucleoprotein consisting of nucleic acid and a protein coat called as capsid. Viroids are the infectious agents which consist of the RNA. It does not consist of the protein coat. And prions are the infectious agents which consist only of the protein, but it does not contain the genetic material. And in viruses, which contains both protein coat as well as the genetic material, in them the infectious part is the genetic material. Now the last part of the chapter, that is the lichens. Now once I told you the description regarding the lichens. So lichens are the organisms which show the symbiotic relationship between the algae and fungi. So when we studied fungi, I told you that certain fungi are found in close association with the algae, and such symbiotic relationship between the algae and fungi is called as the lichens. Now when I talk about the symbiotic relationship, what do you mean by symbiotic relationship? It is a relationship or it is an interrelationship between the two organisms where both the organisms are benefited by each other's presence. None of the organism will cause the harm to the other organism. So symbiotic mutualistic relationship is a relationship between the two organisms where both the organisms are benefited by each other's presence. And such a symbiotic relationship between algae and fungi is called as the lichens. Now, in a lichen, the algal component is called as the phycobiont, and the fungal component is called as the mycobiont. Very important, in a lichen, the algal part is called as the phycobiont and the fungal part is called as the mycobiont. And this phycobiont part is the autotrophic part, or you can say the algal part is the autotrophic because algae possess the chlorophyll pigment, whereas the fungal component is the heterotrophic because fungi do not consist of the chlorophyll pigment. Very important. So in a lichen, the algal component is phycobiont and it is autotrophic, and the fungal component is called as mycobiont and it is heterotrophic. Now how both the organisms are benefited by each other's presence? It is a symbiotic relationship, and in symbiotic relationship both the organisms are benefited by each other's presence. So now how algae and fungi are benefited by each other in lichen. So algae, as it contain chlorophyll pigment, it will prepare food for fungi as well as for itself, whereas how fungi is helpful to algae. So it provides, the fungi provides shelter and absorb the mineral nutrient and water for its partner. Who is its partner? Algae. Now question arises, how the fungi will absorb the material. So we know that fungi is made up of the hyphae, and this hyphae penetrates deep inside the soil and it absorbs the water and minerals, and this absorbed water and minerals it give it to the algae, and using this nutrients and water, the algae will prepare the food. So in this way both the organisms are benefited by each other's presence. Now their association is so close that if you see algae, we cannot believe that is the association between algae and fungi in lichen is so close that suppose if we see lichen, we won't say that there have in a lichen the two organisms are present. So close is their association that if one saw a lichen in nature, one would never imagine that they had two different organisms within them. So the two organisms, that is algae and fungi in lichens, are so closely associated with each other that if we see a lichen, we couldn't believe or we couldn't imagine that lichen is made up of two different organisms. Now very important thing here to note is lichens are very good pollution indicators. So if we want to know whether a particular area is a polluted one or non-polluted one, we can get it through the lichens. Lichens never grow in a polluted area. So suppose if an area is polluted, their lichens do not grow. Lichens only grow in the non-polluted area. So that is regarding the lichens. What are lichens? It is a close symbiotic association between the algae and fungi. Algal component is phycobiont, which is autotrophic, and fungal component is mycobiont, which is heterotrophic. Both the organisms are benefited by each other's presence. How algae is benefited to fungi? So algae being autotrophic, it will prepare the food and provide it to the fungi. And how fungi is helpful to the algae? So fungi, it provides the shelter, as well as fungi, as it contains the hyphae, it absorbs the nutrients and water from the soil, provide it to the algae, and algae using these nutrients and water will prepare the food for itself as well as for the fungi. And lichens, we know, are very good pollution indicators. They never grow in the polluted areas. So here we come to the end of our chapter. If you have doubts, students, you can call me. Thank you, students.